Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel Law in Motion. Imagine being told you can't enter a sacred place because of your biology. Sounds outrageous, right? Well, that's exactly what sparked one of the most controversial and emotional legal battles in India. This is the story of how a 12th century tradition collided with modern constitutional rights, and how one Supreme Court ruling shook not just the pillars of a temple, but of society itself. Alright, before we dive into the drama and protests, let's simplify what's actually going on here. The Sabarimala temple has this ancient tradition. For centuries, women between the ages of 10 and 50 weren't allowed to enter. Why? Because Lord Ayyappa, the deity worshipped here, is considered a celibate deity. The belief is that women of menstruating age would disrupt his vow of celibacy. Sounds old-fashioned? Well, it gets more complicated when you bring in India's constitution. According to Article 14, all Indian citizens have the right to equality. This includes gender equality. But here's the twist, Article 25 also exists, and it guarantees the right to freedom of religion. So now, we've got a legal pickle. On one side, we have gender equality under Article 14. This says you can't discriminate against women. But on the other side, Article 25 says religious groups are allowed to maintain their customs. The question that landed at the steps of the Supreme Court was profound. Can a religious tradition override the right to equality? In 2018, the court had to decide, does tradition trump equality? Or is it the other way around? The story begins with a bold move by the Indian Young Lawyers Association. They filed a petition challenging the centuries-old ban on women of menstruating age entering the Sabarimala temple. Their argument? This ancient tradition was not just an outdated custom, it was discriminatory, violating the fundamental rights guaranteed to women under the Indian Constitution.
Honorable judges, Article 14 ensures every citizen's right to equality. Denying women access to the temple, solely based on their biological function, undermines this very right. This is not just about religion, it's about justice for all Indian women.
But it wasn't that simple. To the devotees of Lord Ayyappa, this case wasn't about equality or constitutional rights, it was about faith. For generations, they believed in a sacred tradition that revered Lord Ayyappa as a celibate deity. Allowing women of menstruating age into the temple, they argued, would disrupt his sanctity.
We are not against women. Our belief is rooted in the deity's vow of celibacy. This is not discrimination, it's about preserving our age-old customs. Changing this is like changing the very foundation of our worship.
On one side, you had women demanding their right to worship, insisting that no tradition should stand in the way of gender equality. On the other, you had a deeply rooted religious belief, protected by thousands of years of devotion. For the devotees, it wasn't about women, it was about upholding the purity of Lord Ayyappa's temple.
This is our country too. We cannot be excluded from our own places of worship. If we allow this ban to stand, what's next? Our right to enter schools, offices. This is about fundamental rights.
And so, the battle lines were drawn. On one side, the demand for gender equality and the right to worship. On the other, the unshakable belief that this was about more than just rights. It was about preserving the sanctity of a tradition stretching back through the centuries. The stakes couldn't have been higher. In a 4-1 majority ruling, the Supreme Court declared that barring women from the temple was unconstitutional. Chief Justice Deepak Misra stated.
Devotion cannot be subjected to the rigidity and stereotypes of gender.
For many women, this was a landmark victory, a triumph of equality over centuries-old traditions. But for others, this judgment was an attack on their deeply held beliefs. To them, this ruling wasn't just a matter of equality, it was a challenge to their faith. The ruling split the country, gender equality on one side, religious tradition on the other. Both sides believed they were fighting for what was right. And thus, the battle between constitutional rights and religious beliefs began to play out not only in court but in the streets, the media, and the hearts of millions. While the Supreme Court ruling was hailed as a landmark victory for gender equality, the reality on the ground was anything but peaceful. Women who tried to enter the temple after the ruling were met with fierce opposition. Protesters blocked roads, chanting slogans and forming human barricades. It wasn't just about religion anymore, this was a battle for identity, tradition, and social order. The streets around Sabarimala turned into battlegrounds. Violent clashes erupted between police, protecting the rights of women to enter, and devotees who believed they were defending their faith. What began as a fight for equality quickly spiraled into a national crisis. And it didn't stop there. What unfolded was far more than a legal controversy. It was a reflection of the larger tension between tradition and modern constitutional rights.
Is this an attack on faith? Or is this the natural progression of a modern society fighting for equal rights?
Our traditions are not for the courts to decide. The Supreme Court cannot dictate how we practice our religion.
This isn't about religion. This is about fundamental rights. Women cannot be barred from public spaces simply because of their gender.
Across the country, people took to the streets. Some in support of the court's decision, others in staunch opposition. It was a conversation that went beyond the temple. It raised fundamental questions about the role of religion in a rapidly evolving society. Could religious practices remain unchanged in the face of growing demands for equality? Or would modern legal principles reshape centuries-old traditions? The Sabarimala verdict didn't just rewrite the rulebook on temple entry. It sparked a larger debate about the future of religious freedoms, women's rights, and the fine line between faith and the law in a modern India. Was the Supreme Court right to intervene? Or should religion have the autonomy to decide its own practices? What would you do if you were the judge in this case? Now, before you start flipping through your law books, don't worry, we've got you covered. The legal jargon may sound intimidating, but at its heart, this case was really about one thing: balance. Balancing tradition with equality. Sounds like a legal seesaw, right? So, what can we learn from this case? First, the law doesn't exist in isolation. It interacts with faith, society, and evolving norms. Second, courts often become the stage for much larger cultural battles. And finally, sometimes, equality requires shaking up long-standing traditions. As we wrap up, let's distill the key legal takeaways from the Sabarimala temple case. The core of this case was the conflict between Article 14, right to equality, and Article 25, freedom of religion, of the Indian Constitution. The Supreme Court ruled that the ban on women's entry violated their constitutional right to equality and did not fall under the protected realm of religious practice. The court emphasized the concept of constitutional morality, stating that even deeply entrenched religious customs cannot override fundamental rights. Traditions that perpetuate gender discrimination must yield to constitutional principles. The judgment challenged gender stereotypes by declaring that biological factors like menstruation cannot justify discrimination. As Chief Justice Deepak Misra stated, devotion cannot be subjected to the rigidity of gender. The case set a precedent for courts to re-examine religious practices in light of evolving societal norms. It affirmed that religious traditions must adapt to uphold constitutional values of equality and non-discrimination. The Sabarimala verdict has become a cornerstone for future legal debates on the intersection of faith and equality. It has opened the door for re-evaluating other religious practices that may conflict with fundamental rights. In conclusion, the Sabarimala case wasn't just about temple entry, it was about redefining the balance between tradition and modern constitutional rights. If you found this story fascinating, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got more amazing legal stories like this one coming your way on Law in Motion. And don't forget to drop a comment below. What do you think about the court's decision? Remember, justice isn't just a word, it's a story, and we're here to tell it.